Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this live stream. This is long overdue. Everyone wants to know, what does Firas Zahabi think about the Jordan Peterson discussion with Muhammad Hijab. So, Assalamu alaikum, Firas Bhai. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. How are you? I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. When I rang you earlier, all I could hear was somebody just smashing some pads. You sounded like you were out of breath, and I was like, "Oh man, I caught him at a bad time." You seem to be
We're-
training. Do you train every day?
yeah, every day, every single day, twice a day. Every single day, twice a day, every day. I just came back from Vegas, so I was a bit jet lagged, but still in the gym. Going back to the gym later. It's always every day. There's the trend. We're in the trenches every single day.
Allahu Akbar. And when we
Allahu
met some months back, and we were in a restaurant, you were hardly eating anything, and you seemed to be almost semi-vegan. Like, I'm sure people want to know, like, are
No,
you a
I'm
nomad?
definitely
Like, what do you do?
I'm definitely not vegan because when I say I eat less meat than before, people automatically jump. He's a vegan. I'm not a vegan. Just because you lowered your portions of meat doesn't mean you're vegan. Okay, now I definitely eat meat. Now I just interviewed a carnivore MD, Paul Saladino, so I'm experimenting with the carnivore diet. So I eat meat, guys. I eat halal meat every day, or before I was eating it 3 times a week, twice a week sometimes even once a week. I found that I lost muscle. Okay, so I was trying to keep my protein high with plant foods. It was very difficult, hard to digest, always bloated, gassy, etc. Wasn't a comfortable feeling. I experimented with less meat and more plant proteins. It was good for endurance, not so good for maintaining muscle. Very difficult to maintain muscle. It's a question of bioavailability. This is a very complex topic. How much of these plant proteins are we absorbing? That's really one major question. I know it's a massive debate. We're not going to clear it here now, but I'm now experimenting with the other side, the carnivore diet, etc. I just released a podcast with Paul Saladino, carnivore MD. I really believe that in the end, I'm going to end up somewhere in the middle. I think all food groups are important. I don't ultimately, if you ask me my opinion now, as it is now, I don't believe in eliminating any food group. I eat absolutely everything. I'm an omnivore ultimately, but I am experimenting to see, verify their claims, experiment with my, my personal biology, etc. How
Yeah,
my body reacts. But ultimately speaking, I think meats are very good for maintaining and building muscle, and the
yeah,
carbohydrates are very good for endurance,
yeah,
explosive sports and endurance. So I ultimately say you need both. How much do you need now or then? If I was if I was in a sporting event tomorrow, I would carb up. If I just finished a sporting event yesterday, I'd want to build more muscle, because we go from building muscle to then building endurance. Okay, we don't build
yeah.
endurance and then build endurance and then build endurance. You'll lose muscle, you'll lose power, you'll lose strength, you'll lower your testosterone levels. If you look at marathon runners, some of them have their testosterone as low as a castrated man. So
Wow,
you don't want to do it. We
that's
go through
crazy.
cycles of power training,
Yeah,
strength training, and of course endurance training. So I believe you have to cycle it. I believe there's a time and place for it all. Maybe we do another podcast one day on nutrition. But I'm definitely not vegan. A lot of people mistaken me for a vegan because
Allahu
I
Akbar.
do take breaks from meat sometimes because I'm in an endurance phase, which
Right.
I don't think is bad. It's good to go off meat for once in a while. I
It
just think if
is.
people eat too much meat, if you're eating processed foods, you should be very careful of how much meat you eat. So,
Yeah,
anyways, that's another topic for another day.
absolutely. And talking about these uh, the sort of health benefits of being vegan, or health benefits of being on these types of meat diets, essentially it's all about input output. And at the moment, if you're doing 2 workouts a day, then it doesn't really matter too much. So for us, a lot's been happening in the dawah scene. I actually invited you to react to the Jordan Peterson discussion, which I'm sure you have a lot of very insightful things to say, as you always do, mashallah. But we recently had a conversion, right? And this is something you wanted to speak about. So tell us what your thoughts are on the conversion of Andrew Tate.
Well, first of all, I'm really, really happy. I want to welcome him with open arms. I think all Muslims now should welcome him with open arms. I welcome the top G. I'm really happy to have the top G on our end. I think before he converted to Islam, there's a lot I agreed about with what he said. I agreed a lot about what he said, but I also had heavy disagreements, and I wanted to actually invite him on my show and have a discussion with him. This is before he converted to Islam. Now that he's converted to Islam, I want to actually, I would love to, you know, uh, discuss with him a variety of topics, because there are a variety of ills in society that Islam will completely fix, and I think he
Yeah,
sees that clearly. And I think it's a matter of time before more and more people start seeing it, especially now that we're having this great discussion on the internet. The internet's made the whole world a village.
Yeah.
And we're all cross-examining our worldviews. And, liberalism comes with it seems almost intuitively true to a Westerner because that's all he's grew up with.
Yeah.
However, it has its many ills. And Islam, I believe, is a balance between liberalism and traditional thinking. I welcome him with open arms. Every Muslim has a clean slate, guys. I really hope all Muslims welcome him with open arms. Think twice before you say anything negative. The man he's making a major leap forward in a time where he's going to be ultimately criticized by the non-Muslims for being Muslims. There's nothing more they hate than a Muslim. There's nothing more this world hates than a Muslim. After 9/11, we've had tremendous amount of negative propaganda, tremendous amount of American media, Western media has done nothing but defamed the Muslim name. There's nothing they hate more, and he's embraced Islam. He's done the hardest step. He's done the hardest step you can take, and there's no way we should welcome him with open arms. I commend his bravery, his ability to speak the truth. I know. Listen, I'll tell you something. I know many people come up to me, tell me they want to be Muslim, but they're too scared to convert. They're too scared what their parents are going to say, what their friends are going to say. I say, make a private conversion. At least make a private conversion, and don't tell the world. Nobody needs to know what you believe, because people are so scared to say that they're Muslim. And I'm really, really happy and amazed, and I applaud him for taking such a brave step. He could have done just a private conversion. No, he came out publicly. I recently had a discussion with a famous person who wanted to have a private dialogue, who wanted to convert to Islam. He was interested in Islam. I said, look, make at least a private conversion, because it's so scary to say you're Muslim. If you're not from Arab descent and you say you're Muslim, you convert to Islam. If you have any type of fame whatsoever, people are going to come after you. They're going to come after you. Guys, this is not you. Research the death of Malcolm X. He was a man who could talk, who can make sense, who converted to Sunni Islam. What happened to him? Yeah, it's a very complicated and dangerous step, and he did it with the utmost bravery. Your Islam, my Islam was easier to do. A lot of us were born in Islam. He took a very difficult step, and I support him in every which way. I protect him in every which way. And if anybody goes after him, he's going after me. I'll stand and protect him against any threat. I welcome him with open arms. I'm really happy he took that step, and I hope he stays true to the path.
Your podcast between you two would be epic.
I hope we get it done. That would be fun.
No, inshallah. It's long overdue.
But they'll ban him and me. I'm telling you, they'll ban him and me. They'll ban him and me. I guarantee you.
I think you're just. It's going to be one of those things where, because you look, like you said, you are going to be challenging him, right? So it's not as simple as because what I've noticed about you, Firas, is that you are quite happy to challenge the status quo. Take something simple like training with with females. That was a big controversy, but you stuck to your guns. Anybody that came after you, gave it back to them.
They're such cowards. They're such cowards. How dare you let your wife come on the mats and roll with another man? How dare? How preposterous? How ridiculous? The men have been so subjugated.
Yep.
The men have been so subjugated that they're willing to let another man grope his wife, wrestle his wife, entangle with his wife, take her on a trip for a grappling. Like they become so weak psychologically. Physically, they're strong. You can ask him, go and fight and compete and win a gold medal. They can do it. Physically, they're strong. Mentally, they've become so subdued by feminism. Yeah, it's absurd. It's absurd. The fact that I say I don't roll with women, I should be applauded by every man. Every man should say, you know what? Yeah, I don't want you rolling with my daughter, sister, wife. I don't want you rolling with my daughter, sister, and wife. Why? It might lead to something. And the biggest hypocrites, the biggest liars of all, are the men who say, no, me, when I roll with a woman, I have no... I always say these guys are higher than angels. These guys are above. I don't know. We have to come up with a name for these guys. The biggest hypocrites. Yeah. If you put a beautiful woman on top of me, I might have a sexual thought. It's natural. I'm a man. Listen, I'm a man. That's why I don't want her on top of me. That's why I don't want to grab her. That's why I don't want her. That's why I don't want to engage in these things. This is a reality, guys. It's a reality. If you put me to wrestle with women sooner or later, long enough, eventually there's there's going to be a spark between one, not necessarily me, but men and women. There's going to, believe me, I could tell you stories about jiu-jitsu. We've had many of these issues. That's why it's so preposterous to me that you know how many controversies we've had in schools, in jiu-jitsu schools, between men and women. Could you imagine the dramas we've had? We've had tons of dramas, not so much in my gym, because my gym, I'm very strict with it. But I know many gyms, many instructors who've been sued, taken to court, lost their gyms, massive feuds. Like I can't even mention certain things, but literally people ruining their entire professional career. Instructors, I mean, there's unlimited amount of drama. Now I'm smart enough to say, hey, I'm not going to roll with women. There won't be any drama. Now imagine a woman came into the gym and said, look, I don't want to roll with men. Yeah. Nobody would bat an eyelid. Nobody would bat an eyelid.
Yeah. And this is why... Yeah.
But why can't a man say, I don't want to roll with women? Why? Yeah.
Exactly. And this is why I think a lot of people who are watching this right now, they're going to be super excited even by the idea that you and Andrew Tate are going to do, because it's going to be fireworks. You know, you're going to agree, you're going to disagree, because look, you speak your mind, he speaks his mind, and where you're going to disagree, you're just going to be open about it. And look, you know, this is one of the things I like about you and a few other speakers, that they're very open to disagree, but disagree in a polite way. And, you know, open up these things and have discussions. So guys, if you want to watch this, if you want this podcast to happen, please comment, tell us about it. And inshallah, this is something that could be worked on in the future. So any other message you want to give to our new brother in Islam?
I want to make femininity great again. That's what I want. Feminism is good to a certain degree, guys. First wave feminism is women are allowed to work and vote. Okay, I want to debate that topic. I think working is good, making their own money is good. We could talk about these topics. Why yes, why no? And we have an intellectual conversation. No prejudice, no hatred towards any group. Just a logical conversation. Mm-hmm. And we could look at history for evidence for our beliefs, etc. We could do all that in a open-minded academic type of way. I would love that. And I think ultimately speaking, we need to make femininity great again. Not feminism, but femininity. Women, in my opinion, are happiest when they accept the roles and embrace femininity.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get down to this discussion now of Jordan Peterson and Muhammad Hijab. So in terms of this overall collision between two different worldviews, and the first discussion, the second discussion, give me some of your preliminary thoughts about when you saw it, what you thought.
Look, there's some striking elements. I would say that Jordan Peterson, he's looking at the Bible as metaphorically true. And to him, metaphorical truths are just as important as historical truths. Mm-hmm. Jordan Peterson's view is, look, the story of Cain and Abel, it's happened in the past, yes, and it's going to happen again in the future, he says. It's metaphorically true. It's an archetype of relationship. He's right in that sense. The story of Cain and Abel, Muslims will tell you, is repeating itself. If you're jealous of your brother, think of the story of Cain and Abel. Do you want to be like Cain? Okay, we refrain from being like Cain.
Yeah.
But we also believe it's historically true. Now, to him, whether it's historically, I would assume now, I don't want to speak for the man, but I'm assuming that his idea in his mind, whether it's historically true that there was an individual called Cain, an individual called Abel, and they were the descendants of Adam and Eve, that's secondary. To him, the metaphorical truth is more important. Okay, so we have to understand where he's looking at it. He's saying, look, it is true. And, you know, I did a podcast on what is truth with Blogging Theology. And I talked about this. Look, the Quran touches on every type of truth. The Quran talks about deductive truths, inductive truths, metaphorical truths, historical truth. It touches all of these, and most importantly, intuitive truths. Now, any master of epistemology will know the difference between these five. Okay, they're all super important. Now, Ghazali will tell you, we believe Musa alayhi salam took off his shoes when he was in the presence of God. We believe it is a historical fact, but also there's a metaphorical truth. It's okay to believe in metaphorical truths. And he says he believes
Then they got...
Sorry. So we have a mix of the two, but I think for Peterson, the historical truth is completely secondary. I'll tell you why. Because if he claimed it, we would ask him for his evidence, and he couldn't satisfy the empiricists. He couldn't satisfy the empiricists. Now, the reason why, in my opinion, he's broken away from classical Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, is because Paul, the author of the New Testament, the first writer of the New Testament, says, if Christ didn't die and was resurrected, your faith is in vain. Paul is saying that if this is not a historical truth, he's telling you, look, don't take this as metaphor, dying and resurrecting. If Christ didn't go into the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, well, he doesn't say it that way. I'm paraphrasing here. If Christ didn't die and resurrect, if this didn't happen, if this is not a historical truth, your faith is in vain. Forget all your metaphorical truths. They amount to nothing. They can only serve you in this world. They amount to nothing. This is very important. Peterson, and from what I've understood, has broken away from Paulianity, Paul's view of Christianity, who is in a sense who Christians today really follow. Okay, there's a lot to that. I believe there's a lot to that. That's why I always say Muslims are more Christian than Christians. Christian means you follow Christ. I'm more of a follower of Christ than so-called Christian, because they follow more Paul. They follow more Paul. They're more Paulianity than Christianity. I'm more Christian because I'm sure Jesus believed in one God. Yeah, I'm sure of that. Nobody debates that. I'm sure Jesus believed in one God. I'm sure he didn't eat pork. I'm sure he was circumcised. I'm sure he followed the law. I'm sure he prostrated when he prayed. I'm sure of all these things. Everything that's undisputed, we all agree. I believe in that. I'm more of a follower of Christ than the Christians. That's why when the Quran says the followers of Christ will be foremost, I believe that's talking about us, because we're really the followers of Christ. And they're more the followers of Paulianity. And I say that with all due respect. Okay, I'm just saying that Christians today, Christian means to follow Christ, are not truly Christian in the true sense of the term. They're more following Paulianity. I say the same thing to the Shia. Shiat Ali means supporter of Ali. I support Ali more than a so-called Shia because I follow Ali. The Prophet, the cousin of the Prophet Ali, Prophet alayhi salam. Ali radiallahu anhu, he followed the Sahaba. He followed the Khalifa. He supported them. I'm following Ali radiallahu anhu by following what he did. He didn't defect and start his own sect. He didn't defect and go against the majority. So, in the truest sense, we're more Christian than they are. Now, if you ask me, Jordan Peterson has broken away from Paul, because Paul is literally telling you there was an event in the past. Now, the Quran addresses this. The Quran says, and I'll shut up in a second because I know I'm talking too much. When it informs the Prophet ﷺ about the events of the past, it tells him about Noah, it tells him about Adam. It tells Muhammad ﷺ, Muhammad ﷺ is told in the Quran, you wouldn't have known this if we didn't inform you. History, you're being informed about history. You didn't deduce it. You're not the greatest Sherlock Holmes logician. You know, Sherlock Holmes uses abduction. It's a type of logic. You know, you see a certain amount of evidence and you recreate what happened in your mind. This is not what you did. That's not how you know about Noah. You know about Noah because we informed you. The miracle of Noah was shown to the people of the past for them to believe. Now, our miracle of this day is the Quran. And we have the Fitra, and we have the example of the Prophet, and we have all these things. But the story of Noah, to us, is a historical truth. One, we can verify it metaphorically, because in Islam, there's a big debate of whether things are metaphorical or not. Okay, and Ghazali believes, yes, there are things that are historically true and metaphorically true at the same time. I can verify you right now the story of Noah. The story of Noah says that if the whole world seems like it's going to end and Allah is on your side, God is on your side, God will find a way for you, no matter how miraculous it seems. That's a metaphorical truth I can confirm with you right now. Now, the historical truth, I take it on faith. Why? Because the Quran says so, and the Quran is true. I believe it to be true because it's true to the Fitra. It's true. I know it intuitively. We're going to talk about this later. Okay, we've talked about the Abrahamic experience. If you've had the Abrahamic experience, the Quran is confirmed. The Quran, we'll talk about this. This is very important. Let's not forget this. Circle back to the Quran, to the Abrahamic experience. Abraham was upon the truth before the scripture, the Quran says. Before the scripture, Abraham was upon the truth. Islam is a natural religion and a revealed religion.
So could I sorry, could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know
I'm
you're
rambling.
in your
I'm sorry.
flow. No. You're making solid points. But just before you get into the Abraham experience, right?
Yes. Go ahead.
I want to ask you, if a person has the attitude which we're going to play now to the Abrahamic experience or the question of God, which you can react to, then how do you deal with that before you go over the Abrahamic experience? So I just want to play
Let's play it.
So people say to me, do you believe in God? And I think, okay, there's a couple of mysteries in that question. What do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God? And you say, as the questioner, well, we already know what all those things mean, except belief in God. And I think, no, if we're going to get down to the fundamental brass tacks, we don't really know what any of those things mean. And so for me, belief, for example, is often reflected not so much in proposition as it is in action. If I want to know what you believe, I could ask you, and hopefully you have some idea about what you believe, but I'd rather see what you do.
Well, can I push back a little bit with this? Because, like, for example, when I was reading your book, your newest book, actually, this time, 12 More Rules. They're very good books, by the way. I mean, I recommend
Thank
them,
you, sir.
honestly. And,
buy them if you haven't already bought them.
I would specifically recommend the 12 Rules for Life, because 12 More Rules, I have some criticisms of it, but it's good. It's a good book. But one thing you did say about it,
it's really hard to believe that you're disagreeable.
Really, yeah. So one thing you mentioned in the book, you were talking about some psychological theory, which I don't forget. I forget what it is right now. But you mentioned something. You said this, the problem with this such and such theory is that it doesn't have any evidence. Full stop. Categorical. All this, what you're doing now, you didn't mention that. You didn't say, well, it depends on what you mean by this. It depends on what sorry to say, but it depends on what you mean by this. It depends on what you mean. You become postmodern all of a sudden. It's like you become now.
That's a definite. Oh yeah, that's a definite.
So here, I'm sure you have. This is the most viral clip you probably recognized. So before we get to the Abrahamic experience, if a person's answering questions that you're asking, clear questions like that, what are your initial first pass thoughts on this?
Well, ask yourself this, okay? If I asked Jesus, alayhi salam, do you believe in God? What do you think he would tell me? Do you think he would tell me, depends what you mean by do. Depends what you mean by believe.
Yeah.
So is this man, because now what he's bringing about is behavioralism. He's saying, look, don't ask me, watch my behavior. Okay, I'm watching behavior. When somebody asks you if you believe in God, you don't answer the question directly. You're un-Christ-like. If you ask Jesus Christ, do you believe in God? Jesus Christ, alayhi salam, he'll tell you, with all my heart.
Yeah.
Love the Lord with all your heart.
Yeah.
This is the first commandment.
Yeah.
Love the Lord with all your heart. You shall have no other God but God. There's only one God, one ilah. It's the foundational cornerstone of religion. The Abrahamic religion. There's only one God. Now here's the thing. Jordan Peterson he loves metaphorical truth. And now he's saying, look, forget metaphorical truth. Look at my behavior. Well, I'll tell you on his behavior. He's not a traditional Christian. He's not a Christian. He's not a believer.
Yeah.
He's not a believer like Jesus Christ was, like Muhammad alayhi salam was, like Abraham was, like Moses was. If I ask any of the prophets or any of their followers, their Sahaba, their disciples, do you believe in God? They would tell me yes, wholeheartedly. Now, if I analyze his actions, he's saying, look, this is how I would tell you, because he's referring now to behavioralism. Behavioralism is, look, I'm not going to believe anything you tell me. I'm going to watch your behavior, and then I'm going to decipher what kind of psyche you have. So if you go around cursing people, I'm going to say, look, he's antisocial. He has a psychology of antisocial. Why? Look, he curses people, he shoves people, he steps on their feet, he doesn't excuse himself, he's rude with others. That's how he behaves. I believe his psyche is a certain state. Now, when we ask Jordan Peterson if you believe in God, after seeing his behavior, I have to tell you, to him, Religion is a tool. He uses it as a tool to get what he wants in life. It's pragmatic. It's useful to him. It sells him books. It gets him in interesting conversations. It creates peace with one another. It's a social element. There's all these benefits. Because if he says yes, how does he satisfy his critique, the critiques of how to prove it? Now the fundamentalists, materialist atheists are going to come out and say, well, how do you know that? What empirical evidence do you have? What logical evidence do you have? And now he's going to be cross-examined. He doesn't want to take a firm stance. If you ask me if I believe in God, I'll say, oh, wholeheartedly, yes. Wholeheartedly, yes. Why? That's how a mu'min, that's how a believer should behave. That's how a believer should respond. So if anybody thinks he's Christian in the traditional sense, I would have to disagree. Honestly, I have respect for the man for having these dialogues, and I hope eventually he does make a full conversion and commitment.
Yeah.
However, I don't think he has yet.
Yeah, and I like the way lots and lots of people are reacting to this particular clip. This is the most viral aspect of the discussion. And I love the way that you've sort of thrown it back at him by saying, well, Jesus, who you claim to follow, would he have answered the question in that way? And I love the example that also Hijab gave him, that, when it came to a particular theory, you said there's no evidence for this. You were very categorical. You never went into this postmodern discussion about definitions. And so it's very inconsistent what he was doing there.
Well, look, postmodernism is a very tricky animal. Okay, when we had this in classical philosophy, we call it sophistry. What is postmodernism? Now, I want to be fair to the postmodernists, because I don't think postmodernism is totally bad. Okay, I think that's a jump. Postmodernism is they want to criticize everything traditional. They have doubts about everything traditional. Now, if I had 50 postmodernists in a room, they might not necessarily agree on the definition. Okay, I'm giving you the best working definition. Okay, the way I'm using the word postmodernist, because there's no exact definition that would defy postmodernism itself, is that, look, postmodernists say we are critical about everything we've ever been taught traditionally. It's all up for scrutiny. It's all up for cross-examination. And I'm okay with that. I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's for everybody. I think if you're fully in the endeavor of finding the truth, you should cross-examine everything. You should be critical. You should look for reason and logic. However, if you're not full-time into this, don't play with postmodernism. You'll just destroy yourself. Okay, it's really a master's craft. It's a master's craft. Don't sign up for a fight if you're not a professional fighter. Don't sign up for it. You'll get beat up. Okay, postmodernism is really something very sophisticated. Okay, so what's postmodernism? Jordan Peterson is also a postmodernist. No matter what anybody says. Look, he doesn't believe that. He hasn't affirmed yet, to my knowledge, from everything I've listened to him, an undeniable truth. He hasn't affirmed an undeniable truth. Now, I'll tell you a quick little story I had once upon a time with a postmodernist. It was after a fight. We're having a celebratory dinner, and a postmodernist came and sat down, and he says, look, I'm a postmodernist. I follow everything you do on the internet, and I want to talk to you I want to have a conversation. So I humored the guy, let him sit with us. He was actually with the group of fighters we were with, and we're just having a dinner, and he told me all about how there's no truth. So I gave him a few logical paradoxes, and then he was stuck, and he said, no, you know what? There is a truth. So he admitted there's a truth. Okay. And he was working and he told me he's a developer in Muslim lands. Okay. So he develops in the UAE, etc. So he knows all about Islam. He's learned about Islam, and he's like, look, there's no ultimate truth. So we sat down, we had a conversation, and then he told me, listen very carefully, he told me there is no truth. I gave him some logical paradoxes that I won't go through right now, and then he admitted there's a truth, because ultimately saying there is no truth is a claim to truth, etc. And we hashed it out, and he realized, no, there has to be a truth because I'm making reference to it, etc. And he agreed there is a truth. An hour later in the evening, comes back to me and says to me, you know what? I'm recanting what I say. Forget what I said. I'm back to there is no truth. I said, really? Okay. I said to him, is pain true? And he went into his postmodern jargon, and he said, no, pain is information. You interpret it as true. Listen to what he says. He says, pain is only information. That's what a postmodernist should land on. So I said, that's great. So I punched him. I punched him in the chest, punched him in the sternum. Gave him a little pain. And he said, hey, you punched me. You hurt me, man. I said, no. I gave you information. You're interpreting it as pain. So I punched him again. And I punched him. And I told him, look, once this starts hurting and you're ready to admit that pain is true, you let me know. And of course, after a few shots, he's like, oh, okay, pain is true. Pain is true. It's not just information. It's pain. It's pain. Pain is the final argument. Pain is the final argument. Not everything. I've never seen a guy fall down, break his spine, shatter his kneecap, break his leg, and say, oh, this pain is just information. No. This is true. This is real. Hence, one verse in the Quran, where the Quran God casts someone into hell and says, here's what you get for what you used to deny. It's the final argument. Pain is the ultimate reality. You want to say that certain things are not real. Once pain comes, you will not argue no more. You will not second guess. You're not waiting for another postmodernist to come and give you a clever argument. No, this is so real. It's so real. Reality is so real. This is not a dream now. All your arguments are going to fall by the wayside. All your postmodern jargon is going to fall by the wayside. Now, I'm giving you a bit of a harsh example. There are more beautiful examples, but ultimately speaking, firsthand experience, we have firsthand experience of God. Every human being has firsthand experience of God. This is undeniable. I can prove it to you shortly. Tell me when you're ready. I'm happy to do it. That's why I always say there's no such thing as an atheist. You bring me an atheist.
Yeah.
And I'll find you a false God he believes in. That's my challenge to the world. Anybody want to take me up on this challenge?
So this is brilliant. This is a brilliant segue for the next clip that I want to play. Now, that was a very good example you gave of the guy in pain. Now, when it comes to truth, what's interesting is that there's 5 generally accepted theories of truth. So correspondence, coherence, redundancy, semantic, and pragmatic. So obviously, Jordan Peterson is pragmatic, and he gives a very pragmatic answer in this part. And I'm sure you've seen this. So let's listen to this and get your reaction.
Prophecies of the Quran had been met.
So I have to ask.
Yeah.
So I don't understand the question exactly.
He wants to know if you convert to Islam.
No, I'm saying that. No, that wasn't.
I mean, that's the question.
Well, look, I would say to some degree, it's not up to me.
No, but my question was, just to remind you, the question was, if I gave you evidence that would satisfy a certain level of probabilistic.
No.
So you wouldn't?
No, because that isn't how I evaluate the situation.
How would you evaluate it? This is the crux.
Well, I'm a Muslim enough to have been invited to your mosque.
No, you're always invited.
But I mean this specifically.
Yeah,
I mean this very specifically. I don't think, in some sense, it's a very complicated problem.
Okay.
When people meet me on the street, they'll say things like, I met a couple of Orthodox Jews in New York.
I think you have an echo.
Said to me on the street that they call me rabbi, which was it's a hell of a thing to hear, And then I have Muslim people who are listening to my biblical lectures, and
More than that, by the way. Yeah.
Yes, more than that. And they say, well, Peterson doesn't know it yet, but he's really a Muslim, and that's very that's an honor, just like it was an honor to be approached by these Orthodox Jews, and that hasn't only happened once. And I've had lots of correspondence with people, and the same thing has happened with the Orthodox Christians, and to some degree the Catholics, and lesser so the Protestants. And so I don't know exactly what to make of that. We talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
And let's talk about proof. Well, for me, the proof of faith is the attractiveness of its adherents. And that's something to think about, right? Well, are you a shining example of the Muslim faith? Well, how hard do you shine?
So the echo, I think, stopped when I when I muted myself. So for us, let's break down each section. The first thing that he does is he negates the value of these prophecies of using probabilistic reasoning and this type of thing. And you have been a champion and a big supporter of using these types of arguments. So what's your initial reaction to him just saying no bluntly to that?
Well, he said, look, judge me by my behaviors. Did he not? He said, look, I went to a Jewish community and they referred to me as rabbi. And he got choked up and he started borderline tearing.
Yeah.
What's he telling you? Look, it's all about my humans accepting me. My fellow man accepting me.
Allahu Akbar.
They called me rabbi. They accept me. Why? Because I'm part Jew like them. I'm part Christian. I'm part Muslim. He said in a podcast with Hamza Yosef, he said, my dilemma now is to be Jewish, Christian, and Muslim all at once. Didn't he say that?
Yeah.
He's not putting Allah first. He's not interested in the one true God.
That's deep, bro.
He's saying, look, my fellow man, look, take my hand. Let's be one. Let's be family. He loves his fellow man more than he loves Allah. This is counter to the story of Abraham when he was asked to sacrifice his own son. Prophet Abraham alayhi salam was asked to sacrifice his own son. Why? There are many reasons why. Well, one, to prove that he loves Allah above all. And also, two, to show that the Abrahamic followers, we don't have human sacrifice. We're distinct from the pagans. This is a critique we have against Christians. We say, look, human sacrifice, that was an end. We don't do that. The story of Abraham alayhi salam is telling us, don't sacrifice our sons. But it's also to say that, look, we put Allah first. There is nothing in the dunya, nothing in this world we put above Allah. Now he's saying, Jordan Peterson saying, I don't care if I saw concrete 100% proof about Islam. To me, it's irrelevant. To me, it's, I want to be accepted by my fellow man. That's what I'm seeing from his behavior. He asked me to judge him upon his behavior. He teared when the Jews called him rabbi. Why? Because he's taking stories from the Old Testament, the Torah, and he's making them great again. He's making them beautiful again. He's making them palatable to the masses. He's showing the beauty of the Old Testament, and that's making him friends in the Jewish community, and that's making him friends in Christian community. But what about the truth? Would he say he loves God if it was gonna hurt his relationships? If people cursed him because he loved Allah, would he still love God? Would he be like the many prophets who were cursed and killed and persecuted for loving God? When the Prophet ﷺ went to Tate and he preached Islam and they stoned him,
Yeah.
did he quit? Or did he say, look, Mahatma Gandhi said about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said he was amazed at his dedication to the belief in one God. It perplexed him. It fascinated him. His undying, unchanging, unrecanting, never faltering, never blinking, never waning, never even hesitating in admitting his true belief to one God. This takes a backseat in the Jordan Peterson religion. To him, it's about community. It's about pragmatism. At least from what I understand, from what I'm watching, he told me, observe me, then decipher. He asked me to do that. He wouldn't give me a straight answer. He wouldn't say, no, don't judge my behaviors. You don't see what... See, Islam is the opposite. Islam is, you can't see what's in the heart. Behavior is important, but ultimately there's the heart that's concealed, only known to God. Now, Peterson is saying, no, don't question what's in my heart. Look at my behaviors. Okay. You tear when people call you rabbi. You turn your face when people show you evidence of a revelation of God. If I ask them point blank, did Jesus get revelation from God, alayhi salam? Did Muhammad, Moses, did these prophets, peace be upon them, have revelation from God? He would never give me a simple yes. Because to him, examining that, empirical evidence for that is secondary. I believe he says that later. Rational evidence, logical evidence is subordinate to some other type of truth.
Absolutely. And I think you really smashed it there when you said essentially his paradigm is wrong. He's not looking at it from a God-centric point of view. He's looking at it from an acceptance perspective. And, you know, one of the most liberating things about Islam and why Islam's a liberation theology is because it keeps you away from being validated by the whims and desires of the current contemporary world. I mean, why are Muslims refusing to bow down to the holy cow of woke liberalism? Because we don't care how we look in front of people. We're not going to, do those things which everybody else is doing. So, you pointed out something which is subtle, but it's there. And when it's pointed out, it's an elephant in the room. The paradigm is wrong. is totally wrong. And I love the way you juxtaposed it with the prophets, who on the day of judgment, some of them will have no followers. Some of them, like Ibrahim alayhi salam, he had to fight everybody, including his own father, right? And until you have that, I mean, wouldn't you say that's part of masculinity as well? That it's about doing the right principled thing, regardless of whether people like you or not.
I wouldn't say that's untrue of women also. It's part of femininity also.
Okay,
Be
good.
true. Don't be a hypocrite. I'm not calling him a hypocrite. Okay? I don't know enough about him to say that. But I'm saying for Muslims.
Yeah.
Look, me, I'm not apologetic about my Islam. I tell people, no, I believe in Islam. I believe it's true. And I don't enforce my beliefs on anybody. I believe the internet is there. Everybody can research Islam. I tell people, if people ask me about Islam, I tell them about Islam. If they tell me I don't want to hear about Islam, that's their prerogative. That's between them and God. If somebody asks me a question about Islam, it's my duty to answer them. If they tell me, oh, no, don't worry, I have my own worldview. Okay, that's your business. You have the access to the internet just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Back in the day, those people are not allowed to hear about Islam. Okay, well, we're going to go through and we're going to make sure they get to hear about us as well. That was a different time. Now, today, everybody has all access to all informations.
Yeah.
Okay. You're as responsible as everything else. If you're too busy to research God, that's between you and Allah. Some people, God is an afterthought. They're more interested about other things. But me, I'm very concerned about my relationship with God. I put that first and foremost.
Yeah.
I think Peterson is putting his relationship with man first and foremost. And I think that's a very, very big misunderstanding of Christianity.
Yeah.
And it's a really disastrous way to live.
I mean, you're both Canadians. I mean, people would love.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm more than open.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to have a discussion with Jordan Peterson. Very happy. Now, look, he's looking at the world through pragmatic eyes. What's useful to me? That's true. Now, he says pragmatism is subordinate to something else. He's going to call it love later on.
Yeah,
He does another podcast, not necessarily in this one. Okay?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
I agree with him to a certain extent. Though we've talked about this in the past. Love is not the highest level of experience. It's not. It's worship. Worship is higher. I love my wife. I don't worship her.
Yeah.
I only worship one. I love many people. I love my daughter. I love my sons. I love you, Sabur.
Yeah.
I love you too.
Love you too, bro.
But worship is only for one. Only for
Allahu
one.
Akbar. Allahu
Understand?
Akbar.
There is higher than love.
Mm.
There is higher. Worship is another level of love. It's not the same. We can't equate the two. Islam, worship, is above all. Is it not? Why did God create us? What does it say in the Quran? God didn't create the jinn and the man other than for worship. The ultimate experience is to worship Allah, and Allah for him to be worshipped. He doesn't need our worship, of course. But that's the only thing we can offer him, even though he's not in need of it. Mm-hmm. Worship is the ultimate human experience.
Yeah.
The Westerner doesn't see anything worthy of worship. He doesn't see anything worthy of worship. That's why he turns to himself. What's the next most important thing? Me. What's good to me? Let me put on these pragmatic goggles. What's good to me? Okay, now we're gonna talk about Nietzsche for a second. This is very important. Okay, and I think Peterson is not Nietzschean, but he's in the neighborhood. Nietzsche will tell you this. Okay,
if you just please hold that thought.
Yeah.
Because you spoke about worship and you said some really wonderful things, and I didn't want to stop you in your flow, but there is something which there's a beauty in worship. There's actually a beauty in worship, and I just wanted to share something, and I'm going to cut this part out so we can have it as a separate video, inshallah. We're just
okay.
So that's what he needs to do, right? I mean, you're talking about the beauty of worship. You don't even need words. It's like when Aristotle or one of the Greeks wrote that when the pen writes about love, it breaks. Worship cannot even be described by these types of words, you know? So, I mean, that's your brother there. I mean, what do you feel when you see that, let alone experience that?
I just got to say that's the most courageous thing a human being can do. Andrew Tate is very courageous, more courageous than Peterson. Peterson knows this is true. He knows it. Jesus does it in the Bible. Moses does it in the Bible. Muhammad does it. Abraham does it. Peace be upon them all. They all did it. All the men who reached the highest level of religiosity, they did it. Peterson, he'll be so criticized if he does it. He'll have his heart broken by man
Yeah.
like never before. Tate is willing to do it. Tate has the courage. He has the I don't know what to say. He has the heart to do it. It's incredible what he just did there in front of the world, unapologetically. MashaAllah.
Yeah.
Unapologetically.
Putting the highest part of your body on the floor.
Alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.
And this is the medicine every human being needs. Once you have this, you don't need to kill your fellow man. You don't need to step on his head and crush him and take what he has. You don't need it. You have something better. Now, let me tell you something about love. Peterson loves his fellow man, but let me tell you something about his fellow man. Okay? Your fellow man gets old and dies. I've never seen a mother who loves her child when her child dies and he starts to decay and he starts to smell foul. She doesn't want to bury him like everything else. She doesn't want to discard him. How much love she had for him, how much she's in torture, discard his corpse. No human being is going to last. We all end up unwanted and discarded back into the earth. Nobody wants to come 10 feet from you. They used to love you. They used to write poems about you. They used to praise you. Now they don't want to come 10 feet from your corpse. Man is in decay at the very moment. As soon as you're born, you're in decay. Allah is never in decay. Allah will always be there. He was there before, he'll be there after.
Allahu Akbar.
Never hit your star to man. It's a fatal flaw. Peterson is guiding his followers in a fatal avenue. Mark my words. He's headed for nihilism if he doesn't change trajectory. He's headed for nihilism. There are only two paths. We've talked about this in the past. There are only two paths. There's Allah or nihilism. There's God or nihilism. Guys, there is no third path. If somebody out there found the third path, bring it to me. Let's cross-examine your third path. Come bring it. There's no third path. Now, I like to say, sorry, go ahead.
Carry on with your Nietzsche point that you were making about worship.
Okay, so Nietzsche said this. Look, Nietzsche says, look, Nietzsche is like the postmodernist top G, okay? If I can put it that way. He's telling us, look, Sabur, you're not the perfect logician. You never have the totality of evidence. You scientists never have the totality of evidence. There are scientific revolutions coming just around the corner. You used to think the sun revolved around the earth. Now it's the other way around. You used to think in the nutritional world, fat is bad for you. Now fat is the greatest thing. Every generation has one genius that comes up around and disagrees with the past. We have our revisionist history, revisionist science, revisionist logic. Now they say, anyways, there's look, quantum physics, all classic beliefs about physics now have to be overturned. Of course, there's tons of debate on this. That's the whole point. The debate never ends. One master of logic and reason disagrees with another master of logic and reason. Nietzsche is saying, look, you are not the perfect logician. You are not the perfect thinker. You are not the perfect scientist. You don't have access to truth. Truth exists, but you don't have access to it. Slightly different postmodernists. Postmodernists wrongly say, oftentimes, that there is no truth, which is a claim to truth. Nietzsche is not making this mistake. Nietzsche is saying, look, I can't get to the truth, and neither can you. I can't get to the absolute truth. Hold on one second. My doorbell's ringing. Okay, give me 1 second. Pardon me.
No worries. Carry on. Hope you guys are enjoying this live stream. I'm actually looking at the comments as well. So sorry, I can't answer the comments as it's going on, but I can see a lot of you are loving this. Please do feel free to cut up any part of the stream and stick on your channel, stick on your Twitter, let people know about it. Because as you know, Firas Zahabi has some fantastic insight, and it's always good to get his perspective on contemporary events.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So Nietzsche is saying, look, you can't get to the truth. And we're going to talk about this. This is a major issue for Ghazali. Okay. Ghazali wrote about this way before Nietzsche. Way before Nietzsche. And Nietzsche says, look, you can't get to the truth. So he says, look, I'm going to do what's pragmatic. What truth I'm going to accept is the one that's good for me. Why should I accept you're the superior race? We're the superior race. And if you beat us to the position first place, well, so be it. I'm embracing the natural laws. I'm gonna gather resources. It's very Machiavellian, okay? We're gonna thrive on the truths that bring us the most power. We're gonna will to power. Peterson's kind of doing the same thing. I won't accept your Islam, even if you show me endless amounts of truth. What does it bring me? It's going to divorce me from my Christian friends. There are more Christians than there are Muslims. If tomorrow I live in a Christian country and it's beneficial to me to be Christian, this is what I'm interpreting from his. It's not what he's saying. So he asked me to judge his behaviors. I'm telling you that tomorrow, if he's in a Muslim land, surrounded by Muslims, and it's beneficial for him to be Muslim, he's going to start saying alhamdulillah, he's going to start praying, and it's beneficial to him.
You know, that's a very interesting point. And just to add to that, because you mentioned Nietzsche, I just thought there's two things that dovetail nicely here. Now, Nietzsche speaks about Mitfreude and Schadenfreude. I know I'm butchering the German here, but Schadenfreude is usually this well-known idea that you take pleasure in someone's misery, right? And Nietzsche emphasized Mitfreude, which is, it's the opposite of somebody that you look at, they're in pain and you get happy. It's actually where someone's joyous and you enjoy it as if you've enjoyed it, right? That thing itself. So if you're jealous of somebody, Schadenfreude, that sort of person would, if that person has a car accident, they're happy. Mitfreude, they are in pleasure of watching someone else be in pleasure. So in essence, they love for others what they love for themselves. Now that excellent value, you will never get through pragmatism. You will never achieve that. You will only get that through true faith and love, not instrumental values, only intrinsic values. So even if Jordan Peterson and Nietzsche and these guys, they want pragmatically the highest pleasure, which is Mitfreude. You know, you care for others as you care for yourself. You love for them what you love for yourself. And the highest experiences with God, all of these things are not going to come through instrumentalism or pragmatism or these types of things. It's actually going to come through intrinsic, principled worship, which would mean what you were saying earlier, Firas, you have to go against society and you have to follow the truth and do the brave thing, right? As opposed to the easy thing. And like you said, you'll come up with ridiculous things. I totally agree with you. If Jordan Peterson was born in Turkey, he'd probably be doing the analysis of Cain and Abel from the Quranic perspective,
of course,
and throwing shade on,
of course,
you know, other things.
Of course. Now, let me ask you, I wish Muhammad Hijab said, did Jesus Christ die, was buried, and then was resurrected in the year 1 or the year 0? There's a calculation mistake. It's actually 4 years off, but barring that exact calculation,
Yep.
Year 0, was the Christ killed? Did he die on the cross? Was he spirit in his side? Did he die? Was he clinically dead, buried in the earth, and then resurrected? If he says anything other than yes, he's not really Christian. He's not following Paulianity. Now, Christ I don't believe he actually ever said this, but in the Gospel of John, he says, he's quoted as saying, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one gets to the Father but through me. Now, I would ask Jordan Peterson, can those who never heard about Christ, can they get to the one God?
Good question.
Is this true? All those who are not Christian, is their fate the same as yours? Those who are Christian? These are important questions. These are very important questions. Is it literally true? Or is it just we're discussing some kind of Dungeons and Dragons? Because Hijab asked him, why don't we discuss other myths? And he said, yes, I'm discussing Tao Te Ching. I'm going to be talking about these other religions as well. Oh, so what I'm understanding is that the other so-called myths or religions or whatever, how he sees them, are just lessons, life lessons.
Yeah.
And stories that are metaphors. They're metaphorically true. They're things we can benefit from. I'm not asking you about this. I'm asking you, is there an afterlife? Is justice served? Bad people get punished and good people get rewarded. If he says no, if it's not a literal yes, he can't be a Christian. He can't be a Christian. Christianity is the promise that the ills of this world will be made right.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about what you're saying? In a way, imagine someone's thirsty and you don't actually give them water, but you give them a picture of water, right? That's how close he
That's a good
gets
point.
to fulfilling his spiritual thirst, because he's not
That's a good point.
accepting. Yeah, it's not. It's just an image. It's just a reflection of what the actual reality is. And if we look at the situations that he's been through the mental health issues. He's been through, the previous issues with his daughter. All this difficulty, and even social media fame, which could be really detrimental for your health as well. He still has to fulfill that emptiness he has and the pain that he has and deal with that suffering through a picture, as opposed to the real spiritual thirst being fulfilled through God. So he's so close, yet he's so far.
Here's one thing, and I say this all due respect to Jordan Peterson, and I would love to have a discussion with him on this exact point. He's right in a sense. Ghazali said that everything is metaphor. Now, I'm going to be specific here. He wasn't referring to Quran, okay? He's talking about me, you, the dunya, the world around us. Is all metaphor. Let me explain exactly what that means, okay? Let me unpack that. It's really important, okay? This is so important. If you didn't listen to anything else in this podcast, just listen to this part over and over again, okay? Jordan Peterson is a master of... He finds archetypes everywhere. And he labels them well, and he deciphers them well, and he explains them well, and he sees them everywhere, and he's correct. But he's forgetting one colossally important thing. One colossally important thing. Okay? I'm not trying to point this out, but it's really not easy. Suppose Sabura asked you, how long is a knife? You would say, well, it depends. There are many knives. Some knives are 6 inches long. Some knives are 4 inches long. Some knives are 7 inches long. Some knives are 12 inches long. Okay, what is a knife made of? Well, you say that's complicated too. Some are made of plastic, some are made of wood, some are made of steel, some are made of bronze, some are made of silver. And you would say, look, there's an archetype of knife. As long as an object respects that archetype, it's a knife. As a matter of fact, if I draw a knife on a piece of paper, you can be like, that shares in the archetype of knife. Therefore, it is a knife. If I ask you how tall a human being is, you'd say, look, between 5 feet and 6 feet generally. They weigh around 170 pounds. You couldn't give me a definite answer. That's the world Jordan Peterson lives in. Everything is metaphor. Everything is archetype. What is coffee? Well, coffee is kind of like tea, and it's kind of like hot water, but it's not one of those two. There are types, there are flavors to coffee. His whole world is metaphor, 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 metaphor. He's trapped in the world of metaphors. And he's right. The whole world, in a way, is a metaphor, except one. If I told you, Sabur, there's only one knife in the world. This knife is a divine knife. This knife, there is no other knife like it. There will never be another knife like it, and there never was a knife like it. This one knife is the only knife in existence, and it doesn't transform. It doesn't change. So, for instance, Sabur, there are other men, but even Sabur in himself is a metaphor. Why? Sabur is very different than when he was 5 years old. And he's very different now than when he's going to be 90 years old. So Hume told us, look, Sabur is like a link of chains. His mind is like a link. Yeah. You can't say any part of the chain is the chain. The whole chain is the chain. And you could look at all the links in the chain and make an archetype of it and say, look, Sabur is about this. His mind is kind of like this. If you look at his whole life, the average Sabur, the way he was on average, his archetype was this. Was he a good guy or a bad guy? Well, let's look at his average. Let's look at every link in the chain. You're one link being linked to another, and you're making a whole chain. There's no nucleus to the chain. You're a type of vapor. You're a type of metaphor. You're a type of archetype, and that's the world. I know I'm rehashing it, but I want to make it so crystal clear.
Yeah.
Peterson lives in this world. Everything is metaphor. What do you mean by do? Do is a metaphor. Do has an archetype. And he's so right about this. Now, let me tell you one thing. You only know up because you know down. You only know left because you know right.
Yeah.
You only know metaphor because you know Allah. Allah is not metaphor. Allah is concrete. Let me expand on this. When Allah tells you I'm one, He's telling you I have no archetype. I have no metaphor. I am literal. I am literal. If there was a divine knife that never changed, if I had the qualities of Allah and ask you how long is a knife, now you would just describe that divine knife, and anything you said about it would be objectively true. It's no longer subjective. Because if I asked you how long is a knife, you'd have to, well, earthly knives, well, that's subjective. That's relative. They have to follow a certain archetype. The story of Cain and Abel follows an archetype. Brothers are still killing their brothers. Men are still killing their brothers like they did in the past. So he's referring to the archetype. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We're referring to the particular and the archetype.
Yeah.
There's particulars and there are archetypes. Allah is telling you, look, I'm not a multiplicity of gods. I'm not a trinity. If there was a trinity, there would be an archetype. If there was an archetype, now we're in metaphor. Is Allah a metaphor? When God is telling you in the Quran, He's one. When He's telling you He's one in the Torah, He's saying, I am literal. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Nothing in the dunya is like Allah, because everything in the dunya is in transition and has an archetype. It's metaphorically true. There's a concept attached to it. We attach a concept to knives. I could draw that concept on a piece of paper and you're like, yeah, that's the concept I hold within my mind about knives. Allah has try to draw Allah on a piece of paper. You cannot.
Can't even
That's
think.
the whole point. That's the whole point of Allah. You only know Allah. You only know God. You only know metaphor because you know Allah. Now, I tell the people, once upon a time when you're in the womb of your mother, you know nothing about your identity. Identity, psychologists tell us, is developed near the age of 1 year old. As you're creeping up to the age of 1 year old, you start realizing, hey, there's me and there's the rest of the world. Before you heard, before you saw, before you had any sensory data about anything in the world, before you knew anything about up, down, left, right, hot, cold, warm, you know about Allah. You were gestated in the unity, the oneness of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ taught us every human being is born upon the Fitra. Yeah. I knew the Fitra and then I compared it to my first worldly experiences. They're like this. They're the opposite to this oneness. They're the opposite. Jesus in the Bible, alayhi salam, is quoted as saying, and this I can believe he said, this part I believe he might have said,
yeah,
be born again. What does it mean, be born again? Go back to your Fitra. They interpret it differently, but I don't accept these interpretations. Be born again to me means go back to your natural, innate religion that you were born in, that the Quran is pointing you to. The Quran is a revealed religion, but Islam is also a natural religion. The two are in coherence. Mm-hmm. The Quran, our natural religion, and logic, science, deduction, all has to be coherent.
Yeah.
It has to be correspondent. It has to be coherent. And above all, it is pragmatic. It is pragmatic. Okay. Now, ultimately speaking, one day a man comes to a realization that there is the one, Allah, and the many. And the one is unlike the many. Every single object of the many, every particular of the many has an archetype, is a concept, is a metaphor, is changing. The one, in contrast, is unchanging, eternal, objective. Allah is al-haq. What does it mean, al-haq? Allah is the truth. When we talk about this thing called truth, we're talking about Allah. Allah is objectively true. Every other truth is true to a certain degree, is objectively true to a certain degree, but never fully objective like Allah. Allah is literal. He's the first and the last. He was there before all these particulars that we observe, and He'll be there after the particulars.
Allahu Akbar.
He's unchanging and eternal. Perfection is never adjusted. This oneness, you've experienced it. Now, when you see the particulars, you say, oh, that's Allah, this is Allah, this is Allah. No, you're completely wrong. Allah was known before you knew the particulars. Before. And I challenge anybody to try to cross-examine me on this. They would be eventually trying to come up with the number 10 without using the number 1.
Yeah.
There is no number other than the number 1. There's 1 and a copy of every other number trying to be like the number 1. The number 10 is telling you, look, I'm 1 repeated 10 times. But you cannot explain 10 without the number 1. 1 is the foundation of all. Even if you say 0.5, 0.5 is referring to 1. All numbers are referring to 1. The dunya, the Quran says, all the dunya is praising Allah. The whole dunya is referring to the 1. All subjectivity is referring to objectivity. If everything was subjective, you wouldn't know it. The fact that you know that there's subjectivity is because you know objectivity. You've experienced objectivity. The Fitra is screaming.
Yeah.
Look, I did this on blogging theology, but ultimately speaking, your belief in math, your belief in science, your belief in abduction, deduction, all of it, it's all Fitra. It all goes back to Fitra. We trace it back to Fitra whether you like it or not. It's all pointing back to Allah. All of it. Regardless of what your philosophies are. Ultimately speaking, everything you know is based on the Fitra. That's why when you do sujood, when Muslims put their head on the floor, the mind is lower than the heart. How do you know the Fitra? You know it directly. Nobody gave you a logical argument for the Fitra. Nobody gave you a logical experiment. You're having a first-hand experience of it. There is no words. Our words only point to it. Just like a blind man, I could never give him a logical argument to know the color red. Unless I show him red, he'll never know red. No matter how intelligent he is, no matter how articulate I am, explaining what is the color red, he has to experience it. The same way when I talk to you about Allah, you've experienced Allah. Not Zeus, not Thor. That's your idea of God mixed with the lightning. God of lightning. Thor is the God of lightning. The God of crocodiles, the God of war, the God of love. You took something you saw in the dunya and you mixed it with the idea of Allah. That's why the Quran says, make no partnerships with Allah. Don't bring anything. You'll be back to your natural religion. You'll be certain now. You'll have certainty. And let me tell you something. There's no greater joy than having certainty. There's no greater joy. I don't have any mathematical certainty. I don't have any empirical certainty. I don't have any scientific certainty. I don't have any logical certainty. I don't believe I'm the greatest logician. Allah is known to us by way of mercy, grace. And no man can tell you, hey, you need to learn from me if you want to know about Allah. You were born knowing about Allah. Men can only remind you about Allah. Men can only remind you about Allah. The Prophet ﷺ recited the Quran as a reminder to us of what? The Quran says, before we came into this earth, we gave a shahada. Allah asked us, am I not your Lord? We all said yes. We're all born with this innate belief. I hope Jordan Peterson discovers this. And this will trump all his metaphors. Because his metaphors are only known because he has an innate belief of the singularity, the objective single truth. They all compare. They're all comparisons. They're all referring to back this one truth. How could you know the number 10 if you don't already know the number 1? Everything is subjective to Peterson. Everything is up to scrutiny. Everything is true enough, correct enough. Never ultimately true. He's correct on this. As long as he says, La ilaha illallah, there's only one objective truth we can be certain of. Everything else, we're doing our best. We're doing our best. Once you come upon this certainty, you can never have a doubt again. You will never have a doubt again. There's Allah and then everything else. This is what it means. La ilaha illallah. There is no other. Guys, let me tell you something, guys. Islam is very close to atheism. Very close. The Prophet ﷺ discarded us from every pagan. The Arabs, he discarded us from every pagan belief. But there's one God we cannot reproach. There's one, the only one. We cannot. Here, doubt is proof. Listen carefully to this. Here, doubt is proof. I'm going to say something now and then I'll be quiet because I know I'm talking too long.
That's wonderful stuff, though.
we all within us have a point of awareness. Mm-hmm. There's a point of awareness within all of us. Think about that. This singular point, the idea of point and the idea of within is also contained in it. The whole world is contained in it. Even my flesh is contained in it. Actually, it contains everything and nothing contains it. You think it's within. It's not within. It's not within. It's apparently within. That's okay. It's apparently within. This awareness encompasses all. There are not two awarenesses. There is one awareness. It's singular. When you come upon this natural theology, the Quran makes sense. Trinities break my ears. Polytheism breaks my ears. I don't see any polytheism at all. I don't see any multiple persons. I don't see any of this. I don't see any of this. I can verify the Quran for you personally. I was born upon this faith. I know I have a direct verification of it. The Quran says, look up at the universe, look up at the sky, the heavens, and your vision will come back to you humbled. You won't find any rifts. I'll tell you why. The Quran is responding to certain pagans believe that space was like the blackness of space was a type of tarp, and there were little cracks in the tarp, and you saw heaven. The stars were basically little tears, and there was heaven on the other side. Now there are many myths. This is one of them. The Quran is saying no. These are not rifts or tears. There's no limit. You're not even seeing you think you're seeing the heavens. You think you're seeing paradise. This is nothing. You're gonna your vision will come back humbled. Why? Because you'll realize it'll come back to you humbled that you're experiencing the outer world within, and this within is also in appearance only. You're gonna have this self-referring paradox that you're gonna realize that even you are contained in this singularity. And everything you've ever known, history, science, logic, it's all contained within this. And all you actually know, the only thing you actually know is this direct experience with this singularity. And then you'll truly understand the words, La ilaha illallah. Then you will truly understand, La ilaha illallah. You've never had an experience of two singularities. You've only had, we're not talking about the contents of consciousness. That's all dunya. We're talking about this one point of awareness that no sophisticated machine, AI, will ever have. I have the robot experiment. We've talked about it. I've tried to give this thought experiment to try to make people understand this. Nothing you can do, the most complex machines will never have this point of awareness. Now, the Quran and Ayat al-Nur recites it beautifully. I won't go into it now because I'm talking too long, but we have this point of awareness, and you cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong about your faith in one God. Everything depends on this point. Everything, the singularity, everything. Even philosophers admit to this. They call it the egocentric predicament.
What's beautiful about what you're saying, Firas, is that while you were speaking, I remembered a conversation between John Lennox and Richard Dawkins, which was essentially where the beauty of theology is, because it's not there, the Islamic clear concept of God, whatever you talk about in terms of the universe, the vastness of the universe and all of these things, when you try and link that to something like the Trinity, you said it breaks your ears. The same thing applies to atheists. So I just want to play this clip because it's literally a summary of what you just said. When you come up with all the arguments for God, but if you don't have the right theology, it cracks. So I just want to explain to the viewers before I play this video what's going on here. So this is a debate which happened in Oxford between John Lennox and Richard Dawkins. John Lennox is an Oxford professor and a Christian. And here Richard Dawkins is talking about, once John Lennox gives an argument for God's existence and all these, because John Lennox is a fantastic writer. He's written this book called Has Science Buried God? He uses DNA, he uses design of the universe, rationality of the universe, all these sophisticated things, but then he goes to Jesus, right? So just listen to Dawkins' reply because it's very interesting.
Leapt from sophisticated discussions of the origin of the universe, where one can have a proper discussion about whether some sort of cosmic intelligence could have set forth the laws of physics. And you suddenly jump to a man who lived 2,000 years ago, was born of a virgin, rose again from the dead.
Well, I only did that because you mentioned it first at the beginning.
I think that's petty, by comparison with the grandeur of the universe.
So I hope you saw there, he ignored all of his arguments and he gave a very good rebuttal. He said, because in the debate, if you watch it for us, you'll see John Lennox comes up with fantastic arguments for God, which Dawkins cannot respond to. But Dawkins simply says, how are these arguments linked to?
How did you link to this historical event? That's the whole point of the Quran. The Quran's telling you, look, you weren't there for that. We don't base our faith on this. We take it upon authority. We take it upon authority. I believe it. I believe it's a historical event. I also believe there's a metaphorical truth I can verify. But I also believe that I'm not hanging my hat on that. That's not what the Quran is telling us that we have to prove. The Christians are always trying to prove that Jesus not only was crucified, but he died in that short period of time. Now, there are a lot of debates over the cross. If you're put on the cross, how long it takes to die? Well, it could take days. But he was taken off the cross, according to the Gospels, in under a few hours, like 4 to 6 hours. Maybe he didn't die. Well, the latest Gospel kind of picks up on that. It's written about 100 years after the Christ story. And then there's a spearing. They add spear. Oh, he was speared and blood and water came out. Well, we knew back then that when a corpse is dead and you spear him, you puncture his body, blood and water comes out. I mean, when there was wars on the battlefield, if we want to make sure you're dead and not faking, we would pierce you with a spear, and if blood and water came out, we know you're dead. So how do they prove it now? Well, they have to prove that he died within that short period. They have to prove that it was actually him on there. They have to discount every other gospel. There were 50 gospels at the time. Scholars agree that there were roughly around 50 other gospels, 50 other competing theories on what happened to Christ. You have to dispel all that. You have to say that, look, he died, literally was clinically dead, and didn't just survive it, but meaning was crucified, brought down a little too early, wasn't really dead, survived in a natural way. No. He had to clinically die, resurrect. And now here's the other problem, is that people die clinically all the time and resurrect. It happens all the time. Every few years, somebody was dead, literally, clinically dead in a modern hospital with equipment. And 2-3 days later, they find out he's alive. He scratched his coffin up. They heard noises. They opened the coffin. He scratched. He was alive. The man was alive still. He was temporarily alive. It's actually not naturally impossible. It's uncommon. The whole history of how to pronounce somebody dead is actually fascinating. They used to keep people in the morgue and tie bells to their feet because they would twitch, they would move, they would hear the bell. Maybe the guy's still alive. It's very difficult to know if somebody's clinically dead, guys. Even today, with sophisticated modern equipment, we still get it wrong. Doctors still pronounce people dead wrongfully. 2-3 hours later, they come back, they're alive. Guys, it happens every few years. It happens every few years. Who's not to say, if somebody was an atheist and he could take that approach? Yeah, he was beaten up on the cross. He was punctured. The guy survived. His chances of survival wasn't zero. You'd have to cut his head clean off to tell me his chances are zero. That was never the case. So it's an impossible position to say that we know for a fact a man died 2,000 years ago. We can verify it. We're certain, and then he resurrected. Why? Because he appeared to the 500. Who are these? In the gospel, it says he appeared to the 500, not to the gospel, sorry, the New Testament, Paul's letters. He says he appeared to Peter, he appeared to James, he appeared to the 500, and then to me. Who are these 500? We have no evidence of the 500. We have no evidence of Peter. The letters of Peter, scholars tell us, not Muslim scholars, Christian scholars tell us they're forgeries. And I don't want to get into a reason why, but they have very, very good reasons why they say they're forgeries. The whole point of Islam is telling you, look, your faith is not rested on historical events. Those signs were the people of that time. Your sign is this, the Quran.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about Islam is that the theology fits so well with what your mind is telling you. Like you mentioned, the thing about the opposites, the thing about singularity, the thing about, God being transcendent. And what Dawkins essentially is saying to Lennox is, all your arguments are useless because now you're jumping from those magnificent arguments and the greatness of the universe to this event on a cross, and he calls it petty.
You're doing history.
Yeah.
How did you go from God to doing history? Now that's the pain of Christianity. They constantly have to try to prove history, where the Quran is telling us, tell your brothers, tell the people of the book, Abraham alayhi salam was on the path, on the correct path, was guided before the scripture.
Yep.
Before he heard about your so-called prophecy in the Old Testament, because they say, oh, Christ was prophesied in the Old Testament, and now in the New Testament he fulfilled the prophecy. Before that, even Abraham alayhi salam was on the right path. Before that.
Absolutely.
Islam is a natural religion and a revealed religion. This is very important. It's the Ibn Tufal position. It's not my position, guys. I'm not the great thinker that came up with this. I'm just quoting classical thinkers, Muslim thinkers, that have thought about these problems, and they're quite brilliant.
Absolutely. I just want to get your thoughts on this very interesting section. I'm just going to mute myself to play this video.
Because you want to be an advocate for your faith, but what in the world do you know? Right? You're ignorant beyond comprehension.
Let me ask a question. And both of you, this is a question to both of you. Is there an ultimate purpose of life?
Yeah, sure.
What is it?
What we're doing here.
Which is what?
Hopefully trying to make peace.
Is that enough?
We'll see.
Yeah. Because
it's better than the alternative.
What's the alternative?
Hell.
Okay.
Which we're toying with. I don't mean us. Us too. That's for sure. But you know, things are shaky at the moment on many fronts, and we have this opportunity in front of us, all of us, to have a very abundant world, right, where everyone has enough, and maybe more than enough. And we're shaky about that. We're not sure that that's acceptable, and we're not sure everybody should have it. We're not sure everybody deserves it, and even ourselves. And we're retreating into our corners in some real sense, and we're not addressing the elephants under the carpet. And you can't do that. Like the things we're discussing contentiously now, you know, they make for rough conversations, but they make for a lot rougher streets if you don't talk them out. And you have to do that in a spirit of ignorance. You know, like I was hoping to come here today and listen, I talk a lot. There's my flaw, you know, but I don't know how to feel the right way forward. I think part of it is, well, first of all, to find commonalities. We believe in the fundamental necessity of a uniting book across the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faiths. That's not nothing. Like, that's a strange thing to insist upon, and yet we all seem to agree. We believe in a higher and purposeful unity, the necessity of that, and then also in the necessity of putting that above all else. And we also agree that we're not very good at that. But that's the hardest one to get, is that even if you do claim in some sense to worship the highest in this monotheistic sense, that doesn't mean you're very good at it. And that's a hard pill to swallow, especially when you're trying to also be a courageous knight of your faith, let's say. It's hard to be properly humble in the face of the divine, but that might be in some sense the proper command. I mean, the fact that Islam means submission is a reflection of that in some sense, right? Just remember who's God here and who isn't. And that's a very hard thing to keep in mind. So when I listen to you, you disagreeable character, I'm trying to separate out the wheat from the chaff, you know, because there's no doubt I have many things to learn, as I learned to some degree.
And honestly, I appreciate this part of, like, you know,
I mean, there's lots to break down there. I mean, he's just not answering the question. That's the first obvious thing. And then he goes into, you know, his whole monologue, which seems fairly irrelevant to the question.
Oh, you know what? He's a very intelligent guy. I think he has his heart in the right place when it comes to his fellow man. He's trying to find what we have in common. He's trying to make peace. He's trying to dialogue with his fellow man, but I'm more worried about his relationship with God. I would love to ask him point blank, Jordan, do you pray? Like when nobody's watching, like, and you're alone at night.
What do you mean by do? What do you mean by pray?
Do you praise your Lord? Do you ask your God for something? Do you pray? Do you do like Jesus did in the Bible, let's say? That would be an interesting question. Because right now, it seems like, and I could be wrong about this, but religion is just about getting humanity to put its ducks in order. It's super helpful. We all worship one God. We're a republic of laws. We follow the law. We won't kill, cheat, steal. We all agree on this. And if you're not looking, I won't stab you in the back because I believe in God. I believe in this religion. It's very pragmatic. It's super helpful. And we'll have a brotherhood. Yeah, that's all nice. It's all beautiful things. Those are all very important things. And I appreciate them very much. Our religion has that. All religions have that. That's fantastic. But however, is there a literal God out there? Is the wrongs of the world going to be made right? Is Adolf Hitler going to be punished? Or did he live a lavish life and had to commit suicide, but he got away with it? Other than the committing suicide, I mean, he had a great 20 years, let's say 15 years. And then he killed himself, and it's just darkness for eternity, and his fate is like everybody else's. Or is there a just God out there that's not going to allow him to have eternal sleep? These things go outside of our relationship between man, because we're talking about later, afterlife, the afterlife. The Quran says it beautifully. It says, like you came into this life, you're going to go into the next life. You can't explain how we got into this life. No logician, forget about it. We're not even close. You know what he said earlier? He's right. We're logical thinkers, but we're infinitely bad at it. 100%. I totally agree with him. Totally agree with him. How we came to be is far beyond anything we can ever comprehend. That's why God is telling us, look, it happened in the past. It's going to happen again in the future. I have total faith in that. Even the scientists say, look, we have to abide by the anthropic principle. We have to have a formula. We have to have a theory that tells us that life can come to be, because life is obvious. Life is obvious. It's all around us. We can't say, hey, we're accepting this theory even though it doesn't lead to life. Theoretically, it should never. No. It has to lead to life. Why? Life has happened. We're observing it. We're living it. Well, is religion just a tool for us to get along? Because the alternative is hell, war, fighting. Some of us, we're willing to compete. Some of us out there, we're like, if we live in a Darwinian world, you know what? I'm ready to step on you, and I'm ready to do what I have to do, and I'm ready to, whatever it takes. I'm willing to compete. You think you can compete? I can compete too. And I have my way about me to survive and thrive. But if you believe in Allah, well, I'm not going to step on you when you're vulnerable because of Allah. That's the only reason I don't step on you. Because the truth is, if there is no God, everything is permissible. Let me let you guys in on a little secret. Okay, which is very well known in philosophy. It's not a secret. It's well known. Okay, but you might not have realized it. Most people might not have realized it. If there is no God, everything is permissible. There's no right and wrong. Now might is right. Genghis Khan wasn't wrong for raping and killing, and he wasn't wrong. He was establishing what's rightfully his. If there is no God, there's no morality. Now, I'm in the complete opposite view. I believe there is a God. I believe there is morality, and I've certainly believed Genghis Khan was in the wrong for his behavior. I certainly agree that he was in the wrong. 100%. What I'm telling you, if there is no God, if you're a pragmatist, postmodernist, if you're a pomo, like I like to call them, there is no right and wrong. If I take your gold chain from around your neck and you can't do nothing about it, what's so wrong about that? I got a golden chain and you don't. What do I care? What do I care about your state of affairs? I have my state of affairs, and there's nothing your sophistry will do to change my mind about that. The only reason I don't take what you have is because I fear morality. I believe there's a God. I believe morality. And I think that ultimately speaking, I have a moral reality within me. Ultimately speaking, snatching your chain is going to cause me a type of anguish. Being bad to my fellow man is going to lead me to anguish. But that's only because God instilled with me a moral law. I'm not like the tiger and the lion and the crocodile. I have something else. We have more human beings. We have an innate sense of morality. That's another proof of God, by the way, given famously by Kant and other Muslim thinkers. By Muslim thinkers, Kant, and I believe Kant took it from Muslim thinkers. That's why I believe he wrote Bismillah Rahman Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, on his essay, on his PhD thesis. I believe he wrote it because he took a lot of his thoughts. He learned a lot from Muslims. We have an innate sense of morality that can only come from one source. If the universe is just sticks and stones, elementary particles, etc., there is no morality. You cannot get an ontological jump. You cannot make sticks and stones electrical. You cannot make atoms into a moral agent. You can't. Morality is from the divine. These are things that, in my opinion, Peterson has not explored yet. He's still in the world of just metaphor.
Yeah.
He hasn't, his introspects are profound, yes, but he hasn't made the distinction between his internal sense of awareness. He thinks it's internal within him. He hasn't understood that he's within it. To quote one famous Muslim thinker who said, "You're not a drop in an ocean. You're an ocean in a drop." That's something to reflect upon.
Yeah, absolutely. You spoke about morality and, his lack of having that foundation. Essentially, if we were to look at it from his perspective, he could either be a moral nihilist, a relativist, or a skeptic. It sounds like he's a relativist because essentially it's about what's working. So if he existed at the time of Genghis Khan, and he was, say, in Central Asia at the time,
he's worshiping the sky god.
Exactly, the Tengriism, and he'd speak about, the wolf, the gray wolf, and, all of that theology. Another thing he said, which is quite interesting, at this point, Hijab is speaking about Heidegger and then uses an example, and then Jordan's going to respond to that. So I want to hear your thoughts on this. I'm just going to mute myself. And
those seem like the first two
Yeah.
good. Those are good questions to ask in general. Where are
There we
we?
go.
How did we get here?
And this is
where
what-
are we going?
Beautiful. That's what I wanted to actually get to, because this is what Heidegger, Martin Heidegger, he's a controversial figure in his old right. Okay, but he described this as the thrownness of life,
Yeah.
because we're chucked into life. We're thrown into life, right? So the fact now that we're in this world, these questions that we would be asking if we were on a ship and we're just chucked on a ship are the same very questions, like you said, that we would be asking if we're in this world. Where did we come from? Where are we going? I think if we can't get these two questions right, nihilism will persist. You're a nihilistic expert. You've spoken a lot about nihilism. I think if we can't get those
He's a
two...
counter-nihilistic expert.
I'm not a,
Yeah.
I'm not a nihilist. If you want, ask what I think the purpose is to be united with God. That would be
Okay,
my
beautiful.
answer.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so from the Islamic perspective, it's this, right? First of all, ask these three questions: where I come from, where am I going, and what am I doing here? What is the purpose of life? What is it? And the answer is we came from a creator. Okay, so we can approach this in whatever argument you like. I'm doing a PhD in contingency argument. You can do anything you want. You can do it, for example, through the fact that the universe is regular and stable and uniform and possesses life. What's the best explanation for that? Is it knowledge or not knowledge? So we would say it's knowledge, right? Or as we say, it's a creative capacity of some sort. We came from this creative capacity. We came from this knowledge force, right? So that's the first thing we say. We came from this force, this higher power. Where are we going? We're going back to the higher power, right? And we're going back to the higher power with our deeds, which we have to be responsible for, which is exactly, it's a hallmark of what you stand for. And that's, I believe genuinely, that's why you're asking why are so many people listening to you. Because we reject original sin, with all due respect. Original sin says that one man, gave us a sin, the other man took it away. Basically, we're fallen creatures, and then Jesus, you got to believe in sola fide. You believe in whatever you know about Christian.
I'm Orthodox, so I don't believe that.
Oh,
either.
fair enough. Okay, fine.
I don't believe in original sin the way you described it.
Oh,
but that's fine.
But fine. No worries. Eastern Orthodox, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But the issue is that this...
I didn't say I believed in it either. I just said that the concept of original sin is an expression of this problem that we're describing, which is that we're all burdened with something approximating, the thrownness and this ambivalent relationship we have with the atrocity of history. And that's worse, because if you study the atrocity of history with any degree of seriousness, you have to take account of the fact that people like you did it. And you might think, well, I wouldn't do it. It's like, no,
I get you.
I wouldn't be so sure about that.
For sure. You were talking about the kind of, you were talking about the suffering. And obviously one of the major sufferings is the Holocaust. I was reading the book, The Meaningful Life, Viktor Frankl, I'm sure you're aware of it, where he then produced logotherapy and all these kind of things. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to what Nietzsche said, if you have a why, almost any how is possible,
Bearable.
Yeah, if you have a why, almost any how is possible. So it goes back to, everything goes back to purpose, logotherapy. Yeah, just, if you have a purpose, then everything is possible. That's why I think that you can do the best as a human species, in the human condition, if your purpose is transcendental.
so here Hijab, mashallah, is being very articulate, very clear. He's really getting to it, but you can see it's not being reciprocated. The message is clear, but The problem is objectivity, that he will not subscribe to it.
I think the fellow on the right was correct. He's like, look, it's about, I don't like the way he termed it, unity with God or whatnot, but transcendental experience is the ultimate human experience. When you realize that the world is metaphoric, save Allah. So we talked about earlier. You experience that oneness, and there is nothing greater than this experience. Then you will understand really Islam. The Quran is telling you Allah is one, Allah is one, Allah. If you reflect on it, you think about it, you look at the world, you'll understand that there's the one and then there's the many. And Allah is not like the many at all. I don't think Peterson is entertaining the idea, even though his associate was.
Yeah.
Now remember Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow made the hierarchy of needs. On the apex of the hierarchy of needs, he says, look, it's
the highest is self-transcendence.
Originally it wasn't. Originally it was
self-actualization.
Self-actualization.
Yeah.
Meaning that you've exploited your entire potential. If you had a potential to be a world champion in running, you became world champion in running. You didn't waste your potential. If you had the potential to be a family man with a career in business, you didn't squander it. You did it. You went out there in the world and you squeezed out every last ounce of potential you had to be successful. He came back and realized, no, that's not enough. People still fall into nihilism. The West is still stuck in that old pyramid scheme. He came back later and he said, look, his newer version of the pyramid wasn't so popular. Self-transcendence. You have to go beyond the self. There's more than just my life. There's something beyond. There's more. And you ultimately, in my opinion, self-transcendence is you become aware of Allah. And when Allah is known, you know everything is made right. God is perfect. Nothing will be left unperfect. Nothing no injustice will remain unjust. It's only unjust in appearance, temporarily. That's it. Ultimately speaking, this is the ultimate human experience. This is how you free yourself from nihilism. And there is no other way. Don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself. There is no other way.
Absolutely. Now, they continued speaking about worship. So I thought that would be a good thing to speak about, because essentially that's what hijab is trying to really get across to these guys. Jonathan is more... well, I can't say he agrees with it totally, because he also seems to be a hardcore metaphorist, if that's even a word. I'm just going to mute myself.
Transcendental. It's higher than the physical, the material. And for us, the purpose is mentioned in chapter 51, verse 19 of the Quran, which is, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We have not created human beings and jinn except for that they may worship me. What is worship? It's the epitome, the higher point of submission. Is the epitome of love as well.
Jonathan has an interesting take on that too, that has to do with celebration, which I think is psychologically appropriate. Do you want to? I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's something I've been struggling to understand more. I've attended some Orthodox ceremonies with Jonathan and also on my own, and he's very perspicacious when it comes to describing the role of both worship and ritual, and so there's an element. Anyways, I'll let you continue with that.
No, I agree. I agree that worship is also the manner in which we bind together, right? And so without something we celebrate together, then we don't. And so we have different levels of what we celebrate. You know, we can celebrate in our families, the things that bind us, but ultimately that has to reach all the way up into something which is beyond.
I think that's actually very powerful, you know. And in fact, the very first lines of the Quran is Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, which is all praise and thanks.
Sabor, can you please pause a second?
Lord of the world. All praise and all thanks.
Go ahead. Hope you guys are enjoying the stream. As I said before, please feel free to cut up parts of the stream and share it on your social media platforms. I've seen quite a few YouTube Dawah channels Twitter Dawa channels, take out clips and chuck them from, various different live streams that are on this channel. There's no copyright. Go ahead, do it, and share, because every single time I get Firas to come on these live streams, I learn a lot. I hope you guys learn a lot. And he's back after popular demand. He's actually a hard guy to pin down because he's got a hectic schedule, and it's simply wonderful having him because of his thoughts. So I've just gone back a few seconds so we can carry on. Did you want to speak now, or shall I carry on playing the audio?
Sorry about that. Yeah, let's carry on. Sorry about that. I had an interruption outside. Some
No worries.
kids were.
No, and in fact, the very first lines of the Quran is Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, which is all praise and thanks belong to God, Lord of the worlds. All praise and all thanks, and this is a kind of celebration. This is a kind of praise. We agree that praising God at the highest level, celebrating God. I mean, the word hallelujah.
Well, I would say in some sense, if we're doing that, well, there was some comments at the beginning about the importance of music.
Yeah.
And you opened this event with music, and I've been beginning to open my events with.
So I just want to give a bit of context to what he said, just in case some people are thinking, how could they allow Jordan Peterson to come to a mosque and play music? They didn't actually put it in the final video, but what actually happened is we had an imam who recited beautifully, absolutely stunning, beautiful recitation, verses of the Quran about Isa alayhi salam saying, I am the slave of Allah, and verses about Maryam alayhi salam, very clear, explicit. Then he actually translated that in English, and that was the beginning. So that's what he's calling music.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly for us, they didn't actually put it in the final version.
Really? I wonder why, but okay.
So yeah, that's what he's basically referring to. Do you want to make some comments on this before we continue?
No, I'd like to continue if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
With music, and part of the reason that that's very much worthwhile and has to do with this drumbeat that underlies everything is that music is a manifestation of something like the joyful spirit of harmonious play. And it's not semantic, right? It grips you and it sets the tone.
I've heard you say something before about this. You said that music was impervious to refutation.
It's impervious to rational. The meaning of music is impervious to rational criticism.
Yeah, and I think that was a very powerful way of putting it.
It's something, man. It's something to know. And so with the musical manner in which the Quran is presented, a major part of that is the music. And the music speaks. We know the music speaks of layers of patterned harmony. And you talked about the individualism of the West. And I think that there's a flaw in that particularized conception that needs to be addressed by something that's more approximating a communitarian ethos. And I think you can understand that relationship to music because, look, to some degree, the three of us can sit on stage and everyone in the audience, we can be comfortable at the moment psychologically. So we're not too anxious and we're kind of engaged because there's a certain degree of playful harmony that we've established.
Especially with him now.
So there's some
my dark secrets about
there's some
violence.
fractiousness, right? But we're able to integrate that, and so that means we can remain calm. And so one of the things that indicates is that part of our ability to remain calm and focused is dependent on social integration. So you have to ask yourself, well, could you be sane if your marriage was insane? Could you be sane if your relationship with your children was too fractious? Could you be sane if you had no friends, if you didn't integrate yourself into the community and maybe the state and then maybe a higher vision? And as far as I can tell, the answer to that is no, you can't be sane by yourself. It's not merely a matter of psychological integration. It's not merely a matter of the isolated individual. And of course, we understand that in the West, although perhaps not as well as we should formally, because we'll punish criminals, for example, by putting them in solitary confinement. And that's another indication of the impossibility of, maybe if you were an expert meditator and a religious man, you could tolerate the solitude, but you probably wouldn't be a criminal then. So my point is that I view this process of integration as a multi-layered process that involves the integration of the community all the way up to the highest place. And
so when it comes to very clear things which hijab is trying to take him down a particular route, a little, if you like, logical progression towards these truths, he will acknowledge certain things. He will acknowledge the Quran's beauty and how, okay, if we want to use his language, he calls it music, how it's impervious to refutation. And in many ways, we could say the Fitra is impervious to these arguments that are thrown and stuff. However, you always then find him getting away from the theological to the practical, to society, to integration, to individualism.
Pragmatism.
Yeah, to pragmatism, essentially.
Pragmatism.
So everything, it's almost like the Matrix, like everything is 0 and 1 for him. Everything in the world just turns into pragmatism. And that's why it's very hard to, I believe, get through to him.
And the Quran warns about this, you know, are you truly a believer? Don't be a believer in appearance. Don't be a believer in appearance only. You have to be, the iman has to, the faith has to hit the heart. It seems like for him, it's all about, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I have to ask him, even if I asked him point blank, I don't know if I get a straight answer, but remember what we said earlier. If you asked Jesus alayhi salam, do you believe in God? I don't think he would answer, depends what you mean by believe or do. Or, he would say yes, wholeheartedly. So how could a follower of Christ not give you the same answer? You know, so he has to ask himself, what is he a follower of exactly? Because he doesn't seem to agree with Paul, who says it's a historical event, the crucifixion, and it must be. If it was not, your faith is in vain. He doesn't touch on that at all. He's not interested in these historical truths. And he doesn't seem to give a direct answer to, is there a literal God out there? When we say God, is it corresponding to something in reality? Or is it just some kind of Dungeons and Dragons metaphor, reference? We want a clear answer on that. Is all this Christianity just theater? Is it theater?
Yeah.
Is Islam, Christianity, is it all theater? Is it Dungeons and Dragons? Or does it correspond to something real? In Islam, obviously, in Christianity, in Judaism, it corresponds to something real. It's not just pragmatic, although it is useful. Religion is very useful. Absolutely. It does correspond to something. It's not just a tool to get us all to be friendly. And that for me and for you and for everybody, it's very, very important. It's very, very important because we have to make that distinction.
Yeah. See, this is where I think there's a lot of patience that's required when speaking to the likes of Jordan Peterson, because whatever you do, he'll always take it back to that perspective. Now, there's another part I found. I'm just going to play it because I think maybe that's going to help us tease out some more things that we can in this stream.
Secular historians, atheists and agnostics and whatever it may be, right?
it's the simplest explanation.
Yeah, it's a simple, of course. Yeah. So I believe that, first of all, Jesus Christ existed, which in the modern age is worth noting, right? Muslims are the only other major world religion who believe in Jesus Christ as the Messiah, as the prophet.
Right.
He had the virgin
and this
birth.
is a strange thing.
Yeah,
so we
yeah,
should definitely be
yeah.
trying to sort that out.
All right. So this is the first point of commonality. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in his miracles, that he cured the blind with God's permission, that he raised the dead with God's permission. We believe that he even, he created some things which in the Gospel of Thomas, not mentioned in the Bible, like, but for example, the clay bird and so on, that he blew into it and it became an actual bird, that he cured the leper with God's permission. We believe that he was one of the mightiest human beings that have ever lived on the earth. And we believe that his mother was the best woman who ever lived on the earth. The Quran actually explicitly says that.
Well, that seems like a good starting point.
Right. And so that is the first thing we believe. When we look at the Quranic verses relating to Jesus Christ, we don't look at those metaphorically. No Orthodox Muslim normatively looks at those in an eschatological way. It's not eschatology for us. It's history. So we believe that this is actually historical. That's the first thing. And the reason why I mention that to you is because I listen to all of your biblical series. I think a lot of Muslims have, and you know that right here. A lot of people like it, and because obviously,
strangely enough,
and it's not very strange if you know the Quran, because the Quran actually tells us to go to the people of the book and to listen to them and to and you'll find in exegesis, like for example, Tafsir ibn Kathir, like one of the staple exegesis of the Quran, they use biblical verses all the time. Let's go to the people of the book. Let's see what information they have. Tabari mentions what you call Israeliyat, which is basically passages from the Bible, passages from the Torah, and so on like that, from the biblical tradition and from the Torah. So it's not abnormal for Muslim people to be interested in Christian explanations. That's been going on for 1,300 years. Yeah, that's the first thing. The second thing is that because symbolism is important, and you've mentioned, for example, Egyptian symbolism. You mentioned, for example, Orisis and I don't know, Isis and all this. Not that Isis. I know you already think I'm a hooligan. This man is, but the Egyptian god Isis. I have to make that very clear. And so on. Yeah. So my question would be therefore, before we talk about symbolism, because a symbol can be something. You can have a symbol and an expression of something which exists at the same time. For example, you can have something which is not metaphoric, because you can't have a metaphor and non-metaphoric. But you can have a symbol and something which doesn't exist. For example, I say that you are a symbol for Western, I don't know, whatever it is, intellectualism. Yeah, possibly. I mean, you could debate, is Jordan Peterson a symbol for Western intellectualism? Debate it. And he exists. Now, here's the point. Like, that there are central doctrines to Christianity, like the crucifixion, the ascension, the resurrection, and all the above, right? These are doctrines. How do we look at these doctrines? Because the reason why I'm asking you, I think you are qualified, or at least you have some, because you did mention in your lectures that you were taking the approach of the Alexandrian school, which is like Origin of Alexander and his Jewish teacher Philo and these kinds of people who take what you call the spiritualizing text. They spiritualize the text. They were known, the Alexandrian school was known for spiritualizing the text, and they were aberrational in that sense, and that's why they were one of the reasons why they were seen as heretics by all, I think, all the churches, the Eastern.
I mean, just Origin, but the Origin said some things which are heretical, but he has massive influence on church fathers that are respected. But to your point, the let's say the notion that facts have meaning. That is something that as Christians we should believe, right? God created the world with a meaningful structure, so the world lays itself out in a way that when we see it, we can see the meaning.
Exactly, and this is something which all types of Christians will agree with. Catholics will agree with it, Eastern Orthodox and Protestants. All of them will say you must believe in these doctrines as happening. You cannot believe in them as symbol. You cannot believe. So the reason why this actually is...
So when I hear something like that, then the question that arises for me is, what do you mean happening? And so let me just unpack that a little bit. So I did a lecture last night at the Apollo on the story of Cain and Abel.
Yes.
And one of the things that I proposed was that not only did that story happen, but it's always happening.
Yes.
It always happened. It's happening right now, and it's always going to happen into the future. And so I would say to some degree, the mere reduction of these profound stories to a historical reality is an underestimate of their truth, because they're a strange kind of truth, because they're the truth that always happened and is happening now and always will happen. So the Cain and Abel story, for example, you have a story of the eternal battle between something like the spirit of joyful and appropriate sacrifice, which is characterizes Abel, and the spirit of resentment against the structure of existence as a consequence of thrownness and the shaking of the fist at God. And that's always happening, because for all of us, we look at our lives and we think, well, should we be happy to be alive? Should we be grateful to be alive? And the answer to that is often, but not always. And
so it's pretty clear that hijab made the argument, whether you're Eastern Orthodox, you're Catholic, you're Protestant, you must believe in these things. You are claiming to be a Christian, so do you believe in these things, right? And then he goes into his monologue about happening and how these things are symbolic, essentially.
Listen, it comes down to what Paul said. You have to believe in these things literally.
Yeah.
The Bible is telling you explicitly. It's not implicitly telling you. If you accept the canon we have today, which that's another subject. How did they come about this canon? Why are these particular books in this New Testament? That's another issue. Because there was no authority left by Jesus alayhi salam that said, "Hey, he's going to sort out what books go in and what book." There was none. It was a consensus effort.
Yeah.
Some were left out, some were put in, some were edited. Ayman, close the door. Habibi, close the door. Sorry, my kids came in from
MashaAllah.
school.
May Allah bless them.
Thank you, Jazakallah. Okay, the canon that you have now, there are doctrines in it. In that canon, in the thing you refer to the Bible, it's telling you explicitly, hey, taking the mic, saying, hey, this literally happened. If you don't believe it literally happened, we're done. That's what the mic is telling us.
Yep.
We ask him, hey, do you believe it literally happened? No. The answer is a no.
Yeah.
The answer is a no. How should I know? That his answer is, how should I know? You know what? Let me tell you something, okay? I want everybody listening now to open your ears now. Open your ears. That's exactly what the Quran tells them. Those who believe that Jesus was put on a cross and was crucified and was killed, they're in full of doubt as to what happened. They're in full of doubt. And people say, oh, you know what? All the scholars agree that Jesus, all the historians agree Jesus was crucified. The Quran says it was made to appear so. By whom? That's the question. Was it by one group or another? Was it by the Romans? Was it by the authors? That's another can of worms to debate. But the Quran is telling you, yeah, it was made to appear so. There are many things that are made to appear so in history that we later found out were untrue. There are many things in history that were later revisionist historians say, look, it doesn't make sense what they wrote because look at this counter evidence. History is our best guess of what happened. It's inaccurate. The champions write history. It's full of biases. It is not a hard science.
Yeah.
A historical fact is nothing compared to a mathematical fact. Don't equate the two. People say, oh, it's a historical fact. Like fact means something in this context. The words historical fact mean nothing. It's vapor. If you understand epistemology, historical fact is the weakest, most unreliable type of fact there is. Historical facts are nothing compared to empirical facts or logical facts or mathematical facts. Nothing. It's vapor. A historical fact is somebody that said something happened and a lot of people agreed with him and we have no way to verify it. We have no way to go back in time and check it. History is full of lies. The Quran is telling you the exact same thing Peterson is telling you. Peterson is telling you, and remember, he told us to observe his behavior. He's telling you, look, it's not important. This is irrelevant. This is not the core. He's disagreeing with Paul. Have you read the letters of Paul? Paul is telling you guys, if this man didn't die and resurrect, we're finished.
Yeah.
All the praying, it's over. That's an implicit, it's an explicit statement.
Yep.
The Bible is grabbing you by the collar and telling you, look, if this didn't happen, your Christianity is finished. That is not the attitude of Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson sweeps them by the wayside. All these miracles, all these good guys. The important part, the meat, what we're gonna hang our hat on is the lessons we've learned from these stories. And the Tao Te Ching and these other myths we could also learn from these stories. And there's a lot of benefit. It's pragmatic. That's from what I understand what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, not only that, for us, he's basically saying, well, he did say, if we just diminish these stories to just the historical realities, you're diminishing its actual truth value. The truth value is far more than the history.
Well, he's disagreeing with Paul.
Yeah.
And Paul is the author of the New Testament. The vast majority, the letters of Paul are the beginning of the New Testament. So, I mean, he's at odds with the Bible. I don't know how he would reconcile that. I would like to ask him point blank
about this. I'm sure this conversation is long overdue as well. We need to set up something between Firas and
maybe
Jordan
me,
Peterson.
Hijab, and Peterson.
Well, actually, I think you're gonna. Then he's gonna bring along Jonathan. I think you.
That's fine.
If you speak to him, because I think these things
one-on-one.
are very. Yeah,
I don't know if he'd waste his time with little old me. I don't think he'd waste his time with little old me.
Well, I'd put it the other way around. Would you want to waste your time with him?
No, I respect the man. Listen, he's on his journey like everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he's going to have epiphanies. He's going to change his mind. He's going to grow as a person like we all do. Okay, I'm not putting him below or above anybody. He's on his journey. If he's honest and he puts Allah first, he cannot miss.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think the insight that you gave earlier about him being people centric as opposed to God centric, he'd appreciate that. You just tell him directly, this is what I think your issue is. And this is not going to help you. And you're going through, those personal issues where he was completely sick for all this time. Currently, he's on a beef diet and he's lost a lot of weight. All these metaphors are not going to help you. You actually need concrete theology and this idea that the suffering has a meaning and a purpose. And just like Viktor Frankl's fantastic book about man's search for meaning, you need to believe in it with certainty. It can't just be an idea that, these things are metaphorical and actually useful.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The irony of it all is authentic belief in one God is actually the most pragmatic thing you can do. That's the irony of it all.
That's ironic, absolutely. So Firas, we're coming to the end of the stream. It was really enjoyable. I want to bring you back, inshallah, when we have more of these conversations about relevant issues. Any last thing you want to say about this?
I just want to say, look, I respect all groups out there. I hope this was done in the spirit of friendship and open-mindedness. We have different points of views. I'm okay with always cross-examining any point of views and having my point of views cross-examined. I love to have discussion on absolutely everything, especially religion, in the nicest, most friendly type way, like the Quran says. I try to discourage insults and back and forth and hit pieces. This is absurd. It gives a bad name to religion. Before you say anything or do anything about religion, make sure you don't give religion a bad name. There's a reason why Islam is so slandered. It has a lot to do with Muslims. We have to blame ourselves first and foremost. Okay, absolutely. We have to disassociate ourselves from extremists and also show a good example of what it is to be a Muslim. And I hope we're doing that in the most open-minded, friendly type of way. And that's what I hope for in the future.
Absolutely. Jazakallah khair for your time. Until next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi